in order to read the destiny of a people, it is necessary to open the book of its past. And this, for the Philippines, may be reduced to what follows. Scarcely had they been attached to the Spanish crown than they had to sustain with their blood the ambitions of conquest of the Spanish people, and in these struggles, the Philippines were depopulated, impoverished and retarded. They were lowered in their own eyes, they became ashamed of what was distinctively their own, in order to admire and praise what was foreign and incomprehensible, their spirit was broken and they acquiesced. When they had become disgusted with themselves, an effort was made for reducing so many dormant wills to nothingness. So the lethargic spirit woke to life. Then he began to study himself and to realize his misfortune. Such is an outline of their past. We know their present. Now, what will their future be? What will become of the Philippines within a century? Will they continue to be a Spanish colony? Had this question been asked 3 centuries ago, when at Legazpi's death the Filipinos began to be undeceived, without any doubt whatsoever the reply would have been easy. Now, are the Philippines in the same condition they were 3 centuries ago? Let us suppose for a moment that there exist only hatred and jealousy between the Philippines and Spain, and we may see whether or not the Spanish cause has gained ground in the islands. Formerly, the Spanish authority was upheld by a handful of soldiers. Communication with Mexico was difficult. Then the seas in those regions were infested with pirates, all enemies of the Spanish name. Yet the Spanish authority still continues to rule the destinies of the Philippine group. Everything then, at first glance, presages another 3 centuries, at least, of domination. But above the material considerations, are arising others far more powerful and transcendental. Orientals, and the Malays in particular, are a sensitive people. Even now, in spite of contact with the Occidental nations, who have ideals different from his, we see the Malay and Filipino sacrifice everything for the sake of an aspiration or a conceit. So the Philippine peoples have remained faithful during 3 centuries, dazzled by the hope of the paradise promised. All this has passed away. The people no longer has confidence in its former protectors, now its exploiters and executioners. The masks have fallen. If this should continue, what will become of the Philippines within a century? If those who guide the destinies of the Philippines remain obstinate, they are going to force the latter to put into play the wretchedness of an unquiet life, filled with privation and bitterness. What would be lost in the struggle? Almost nothing. The life of the discontented classes has no such great attraction that it should be preferred to a glorious death. But what if the movement springs from the people themselves and bases its cause upon their woes? We can assert that in a few years the present state of affairs will have been modified completely, and inevitably. An enlightened class now exists within and without the islands, a class which forces the inhabitants to leave the country, to secure education abroad. This class, whose number is cumulatively increasing, is in constant communication with the rest of the islands. And if today it constitutes only the brain of the country, in a few years it will form the whole nervous system, and manifest its existence in all its acts. The divine flame of thought is inextinguishable in the Filipino. May poverty arrest their development? Perhaps, but it is a very dangerous means. Experience has everywhere shown us that the classes which are better off have always been addicted to peace and order. Wealth brings with it refinement, the spirit of conservation, while poverty inspires adventurous ideas, the desire to change things, and has little care for life. Neither is it possible gradually to exterminate the inhabitants. The Filipino embraces civilization, thrives in every clime, in contact with every people. There remains the fostering of intestine feuds among the provinces. This was formerly possible, when communication from one island to another was rare and difficult. But now that the inhabitants move from one island to another, and as all see themselves threatened by the same peril, they clasp hands and make common cause. The Philippines, then, will remain under Spanish domination, but with more law and greater liberty. Or they will declare themselves independent, after steeping themselves and the mother country in blood. As no one should desire such an unfortunate rupture, let us see by what forms of peaceful evolution the islands may remain subjected to the Spanish authority, with the very least detriment to the rights, interests and dignity of both parties. If the Philippines must remain under the control of Spain, they will necessarily have to be transformed in a political sense. We also said that this transformation will be violent and fatal if it proceeds from the people, but peaceful and fruitful if it emanate from the upper classes. The minister, then, who wants reforms, must begin by declaring the press in the Philippines free and by instituting Filipino delegates. Uprisings have always occurred in countries where human thought and the human heart have been forced to remain silent. We say the same about the Filipino representatives. What risks does the government see in them? One of three things: either that they will prove unruly, become political trimmers, or act properly. Supposing that we admit that all the representatives would be separatists, cannot the governing powers combat such intentions? If they become political trimmers, so much the better for the government and so much the worse for their constituents. If they become what they should be, worthy and honest, they will undoubtedly annoy an incapable minister with their questions, but they will help him to govern the nation. They will undoubtedly annoy an incapable minister with their questions, but they will help him to govern the nation. Now then, if the real objection to the Filipino delegates is that they smell like egorots. If this were all, the Filipinos, who in their own country are accustomed to bathe every day, when they become representatives may give up such a dirty custom, at least during the legislative session, so as not to offend the delicate nostrils of the Salamancas with the odor of the bath. It is useless to answer certain objections regarding the rather brown skins and faces with somewhat wide nostrils. Law has no skin, nor reason nostrils. So we see no serious reason why the Philippines may not have representatives. Howsoever much the Filipinos owe Spain, they cannot be required to forego their redemption. Spain cannot claim, not even in the name of God himself, that 6 millions of people should be brutalized, exploited and oppressed. History does not record in its annals any lasting domination exercised by one people over another. One of the two had to yield and succumb. Now, applying these considerations to the Philippines, we must conclude that if their population be not assimilated to the Spanish nation, someday the Philippines will infallibly declare themselves independent. The Spaniard sacrifices everything for his country's good. The Filipino loves his country no less, and although he is quieter, when he is once aroused he does not hesitate. If the Philippines secure their independence after heroic and stubborn conflicts, they can rest assured that neither England, nor Germany, nor France, and still less Holland, will dare to take up what Spain has been unable to hold. It is probable that England will look favorably upon the independence of the Philippines, for it will open their ports to her and afford greater freedom to her commerce. For the same reasons, Germany will not care to run any risk. A scattering of her forces will endanger her existence on the continent. France has enough to do and sees more of a future in Tonkin and China. Holland is sensible and will be content to keep the Moluccas and Java. China will consider herself fortunate if she succeeds in keeping herself. The same is true of Japan. Korea attracts her more than the Philippines and is, also, easier to seize. Perhaps the great American Republic may someday dream of foreign possession. Very likely the Philippines will defend the liberty secured at the price of so much blood and sacrifice. These and many other things may come to pass within something like 100 years. Since it is necessary to grant 6 million Filipinos their rights, so that they may be in fact Spaniards, let the government grant these rights freely and spontaneously.